Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Pull Up Tray Podcast, the podcast wherein I, Samson Folk, co-host, and the Tray, Trevon Heath, he pulls up. He's the namesake. I would be remiss if I didn't say that this episode is a presentation of Toonie Bet Online Sportsbook and Casino. Trey, the Raptors just lost a big one to the San Antonio Spurs after losing a big one to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Cleaning the Glass still says 47 and a half wins. They're on pace for. They're tracking. The Raptors are the leaders in the NBA. They've done it 5 times, giving up double-digit
Ooh.
leads for a loss. How are you feeling about it all? Do you have any critiques you'd like to levy, or just how you doing?
First of all, thank you. I'm doing great. We need to ask each other that more.
Do we?
I don't think you asked me. I don't think I asked you either. To be honest, we
We
just kind of
so basically I think we just debrief when we
yeah
need to
we
debrief.
yeah. Plus, we talk like very often.
I think it is a signifier of how good of friends we are that we have skied past the niceties. We don't
That is
engage in the
true.
formalities.
That's fair. That's
We
love.
broke bread on a Christmas. We did Black Christmas together,
We
okay?
did do Black Christmas. Yeah, that is
It's
fair.
special.
But on the game, I think it's just epitome of like if you have hopes of the Raptors like punching up at a ceiling and beating some of the better teams in the league, like this game is just epitome of why they had challenges of doing so. I think from 3 quarters, from a defensive standpoint, that's the best they've played in probably a couple months. You had Jakob looking tremendous, the best he's probably looked since early in the
Hmm.
season.
Yep.
CMB giving Wemby some of the hardest minutes that he's faced probably this season. Um, and overall, like they were hitting shots. Like both Ingram and Scotty were able to create for themselves and hit mid-range shots. But even then, looking at those first, those are difficult shots, and
Yeah.
at some point you come back to earth, and Victor Wembanyama plays the entire fourth quarter, and then you lose. It's just it was a great litmus test to understand who can play in very serious minutes because they actively try to reduce minutes, play a playoff style rotation, and try to win this game. And it revealed a lot, which I know we'll talk about in a second, but it showed.
Whose minutes were reduced? Did you notice? Down to zero.
Yeah, the Raptors have made a clear choice. Jacoby Walter is in. They'll try to maybe see if Jamison Battle can ignite the offense here and there, but in terms of actively trying to win minutes against good teams, like Grady Dick just is not in the equation anymore, which I think is honestly deserved. Jacoby has won the job. Grady, like although being a plus minus god, just hasn't had the season that you wanted. And it's winning time now. They're getting close to the playoffs, so I think it makes sense.
Yeah. It's also a team that has quite a few ball handling initiators. There would be, the Raptors, we've talked about this before, they do their best to hide Grady. Where would
Yeah.
he have gone on the court last night? The Raptors now 4-15 versus the top 10 in the NBA, 1-11 versus the top 6. Obviously, they have some collapses in there as well. And so here's the fun numbers, right? So Wembanyama is out there. He changes things greatly. The Raptors only took 17 shots at the rim. And
Jeez.
so they went 19 of 39 in the short mid range. If you want to look at the Wembanyama effect of all of it, that's a pretty significant number. The interesting thing, though, you mentioned Jakob Poeltl coming back and having a much better game. One, the Spurs trying to force feed the ball to Wembanyama, and both Scotty and CMB doing such a good job of pushing him off his spot. Two, Jakob playing much better. The Spurs actually only took 17 shots at the rim. However, they made 6 more shots at the rim than the Raptors did. What, at first glance, do you think is there because when I think about it, I think, and I walked out of the press room, the first thing I saw is Emmanuel quickly was in the film room, going over film with a coach. Do you think that he, RJ, Scotty, Brandon, who do you think becomes the player that they use to attack a Spurs team that just gets to seal off the rim?
I think it would be RJ. In terms of like his matchup, like theoretically, like his matchup he's going against Justin Champagny, Julian Champagny,
Hmm.
Harrison Barnes. He's a really good downhill threat who can dump the ball off, make plays, and ideally open up threes for other players on the court. But that did not happen. The burst isn't there, and he isn't able to make plays.
The big thing too is that you could see earlier on in the game they were trying both with RJ and IQ to
Yeah,
test the idea of them attacking Wemby in space.
yeah.
They gave up those screens and Wemby kind of stepped out and it was like the Spurs were like, "Do you want to try this?" And the Raptors like, "Yeah, we'll give it a go." But basically what was happening was that neither RJ or IQ they would try, but Wemby was keeping track well enough and just he's so big that they couldn't outskirt him. And so the Raptors obviously they opted to go for mid-range shot making via Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram. Another interesting thing is that, as you mentioned, Scotty Barnes and CMB played fantastic defense, I thought, on Victor Wembanyama. Wemby, after the game, was not heaping praise among them, upon them. He was like, "Yeah, I just didn't sort out my sleep last night. I have to do a better job of like sorting things out on my end." What do you make of that? Does that piss you off? Does it make you angry?
I take it as a compliment. You when someone really throws off your game, the last dance is the perfect example. The only guy that really slowed down Jordan, Gary Payton, Jordan was like, I wasn't myself in the series. That's so much going on in my life. He didn't actually really bother me. It's the same thing. They were able to throw their weight and husk onto Wemby and move him off of his spot. I don't know if it's not many teams are able to replicate that based on just like the personnel that they had. But with the Raptors, if you want to throw the ball in terms of in the post, at any time it's going to be Scotty and CMB with the other one coming on the weak side, which is just an enormous task for anyone, let alone Wemby, who doesn't necessarily have the weight and size to deal with both of those guys.
Okay. So the next thing I have to get your thoughts on is we mentioned that RJ couldn't and IQ couldn't really unlock the Wemby matchup of it all. It's a better excuse than, we make this joke often, than Fred had against Vucevic in that play-in game. Wemby is a little bit more stalwart. They went without, well, Darko went without Brandon or Scotty. So after the game, he was asked about this, and he said that Brandon never starts the fourth quarter because that's the rotation, and
Mhm.
per, most because he plays so much of the third quarter, and because he plays the back end of the fourth quarter all the time. That's what the decision is. That makes sense to me. It was a little bit more adaptable for Scotty, but Scotty, before the game, he said Scotty's quad was quite bothersome for him. And Scotty said, "Of course, play me as much as you can if we need to win. But if you ever get a chance not to play me, please let me rest." I'm paraphrasing, but it's close to that, I promise.
Mhm.
What do you make of that decision by Darko?
I I know we want to win games, and obviously this would have been probably the best win of the season, just based on how they played. But the Raptors, you have to look at the entire season, and if Scotty isn't healthy, I think managing his minutes throughout the game gave them a chance to win the game even still. And you need to be able to rely on your depth. I think the decision wasn't terrible. I think it's more of the microcosm of the talent that they have on the team that they weren't able to hold for 3 to 4 minutes, a 15-point lead.
This is the big thing because I know Jakob's just coming back, but he was great. IQ IQ was very efficient. 20 points on 12 shots,
Yeah.
just zero assists, which is, yeah, he also had zero turnovers, so credit to him for that, but zero assists. RJ has been mucked up, mired in, like, you can just see his step, his burst. He's
Yeah.
way slower as a guy right now
Mhm.
because of the knee, then the ankle. He's battling out there, but he's bad-ing. Like, he's been bad. And the Raptors asking him to carry the front end of the fourth quarter, a lot of it, and just the amount of possessions that are still going his way, it's a little tough to stomach. And I wonder, we've mentioned before, like, do the Raptors choose development or winning? they might be put in a position where it's like you have to choose one and hope that development comes, and that's how you
Yeah.
end up winning. And I just don't know exactly where they go. This is the concern with the team, is that they hit a hard cap and they're like, okay, how do we pivot from here? And I think that's why the conversations have been so similar over the past however many games, is like, or even this middle part of the season, is
Mm.
the Raptors seem to have hit their cap. And
Yeah.
even where in a game where Ingram is, trying to solve the fact that he doesn't get to go to the rim ever, and Scotty the same thing, and you get a efficient, quickly shooting night, it just and you get the 12 points on 12 shots game from Wemby, it just does not. You don't have enough elsewhere. I mean, you get 12 points on 3 of 7 shooting from Jamal Shed. That's not a common occurrence. And
Yeah.
Jakob was incredible. I mean, it seems like, and I mean, it's evident in the 1 and 11
Yeah.
versus the top 6. I don't think it's a matter of Darko's decision making, really. Of course,
Yeah.
you can complain about that, but when he said
Mm.
Scotty, there's a concern. Sometimes there's a concern. The 1 and 11 record, I quite frankly just don't think they have the firepower, man.
You it's so evident when you're watching games, even with Victor Wembanyama having a difficult time. The Spurs are able to run an action where Devin Vassell is able to create havoc defensively because he's able to curl off and go to the
Hmm.
weak side and punish them because they're hemming down on Wemby so much. They also have guys that can get downhill. They have three guys that can get downhill at a great rate
Hmm.
and abuse the Raptors going downhill. With really good teams, they have multiple options and multiple ways of trying to win. I think defensively, the Raptors have shown that they can do things in various different ways and have some versatility, especially when Jakob is playing.
Yep.
But offensively, the answers have not just aren't there. And I don't think it's from a schematic standpoint. I don't think it's because I think some of it to a degree is Scotty's very unique in how you build around him and isn't necessarily the traditional star. But I think it's very clear the offensive talent, both from a shooting and dribbling perspective, is not on par of what a great NBA team needs to win games.
It's a great point you brought up. You said the three guys. Dylan Harper comes off the bench, shreds them alive. I mean, he
Oh
was,
my god.
but that's who he is. He's so special as a driver.
Yeah.
15 points on 11 shots, 7 assists, 1 turnover. He was almost perfect, man. He was so impressive. The
Mm.
2 missed free throws late, which the Raptors didn't get the rebound on, by the way, not good. De'Aaron Fox, 20 points on 15 shots, only had 1 assist. Steph Castle, 13 points on 10 shots. Like this, Vassell has 13 shots. Wemby has 12 shots. Castle 10. Fox 15. Harper 11. Like they just kind of go where the ball needs to go and they
Yep.
trust that. And it is interesting because Wemby has talked about this before. He talks about the Spurs like they're an enlightened offense, which I don't agree with. They run a lot of really old school stuff, but they do share the ball, and
Mhm.
they ask a lot of different guys to do a lot of things. The Raptors clearly do not have that confidence down the roster. Like, it's kind of funny the way you'll see the shot attempts. It will usually be like there's a select role player whose shot attempts go to the moon, and maybe one starters falls off, but like it follows the same formula pretty much game in and game out. They just don't have the trust to go down the roster and be like, can you create a little something? And that's a huge problem, especially since the top end of the roster is not like dominating in creation either.
Yeah, it makes it challenging. And the way that Brandon Ingram plays like can be frustrating. He didn't process wise, like offensively, he wasn't the greatest, forcing a lot of shots to the rim. The mid range shots came back to earth, especially in the fourth quarter, as like the Spurs hem down on him. But when you look at he should move the ball and try to fit in the flow of the offense. The secondary option, if it's not Emmanuel quickly, is probably a Jacoby Walter like standstill three, which like the defense isn't actually moving from. Like Mamu has been great, but like defenses aren't reacting in the ways that you need for an NBA offense to create flow. Devin Vassell again, just because of his movement and his ability as a shooter, makes things so much more difficult for a defense. And at any time they can ask, hey, Dylan Harper, go get us a bucket, get downhill, let's make a play. Wemby's also going to be that vertical spacer
Mhm.
for you. The Raptors just don't have the requisite talent to have those options, and then you're forced with a lot of difficult shots, which is either a Scotty or Bi mid range shot, or you sometimes are seeing IQ trying to be something that he's not, which I think we've seen through a couple seasons now.
Yep. And on top of that too, like obviously the Spurs have a puncher's chance at maybe a finals here.
Yeah, for
Maybe a
sure.
championship. They're a very talented team, they're a unique team, they're a fantastic team. And so the disparity when you go down the roster of like Raptors Spurs, it's not going to look okay. But even like you look at the game, Isaiah Joe goes for 22 points against them, right? Caruso has 16 on 6 to 10 shooting. Kaysen Wallace has 27, 8 and 7 on 11 to 16. Lou Dort 15 points on 16 shots. Dort was like, I have to get usage up. I have to empty the clip. This is what the offense needs tonight. And it's not like, 116 points in today's NBA is not a whole bunch, but the Thunder scored well enough. The Raptors scored 107 against the Thunder and against the Spurs. The Raptors just, they very clearly, this is my only, I don't know if it's a critique of Darko because I don't know if he's right or wrong. But what's
Mhm.
been clear in showing up this year is that there is very little trust paid to the back end of this roster in terms of giving you anything. And that lack of trust has definitely been earned in terms of like missing shots, easy
Yeah.
shots. But you have to wonder, like the team drafted these guys. They didn't draft them to be standstill players. Is there maybe ever a motivation to be a little bit more creative or a little bit more diverse? And especially like, so I'm working on a what happened to Grady Dick piece right now. Like, I don't know if technically I'm waving the white flag here, but I'm like, what happened? So I'm asking about him for quotes and stuff. And Darko last night, when I asked him about the jumper, he was like, he's a rhythm player. It's a rhythm thing. And first, that doesn't pass my sniff test, really. But also, if he is a rhythm player, and if rhythm is so important to players, and if rhythm is so important to usage and efficiency, does it not behoove you to look down the roster a little bit more and to try and create rhythm for more than just the four players who get
Yeah.
paid big money? That is the biggest thing I wonder about in terms of this team. It is the great question mark because not only does it create like depth and potential for this year, but like honestly, a way to develop out of the current let's say treadmill, because people love that term, the treadmill they're currently on, look that it looks like it just where do you land on that, the usage down the roster?
They're in a weird spot because they're trying to obviously like avoid the plan. Ideally in this season, you Jacoby has been great, but ideally within this season, one of these young guys emerges and says that, hey, they have more offensive talent than you probably are expecting. We need to adjust some of our usage. I think some of that early in the season, like Grady has some of that lenience and did not produce at all, which
Mm-mm.
which is tough. And like Jacoby, although like you want him to take some of those attempts, like he did take that mid range jumper coming down off the curl, hasn't shown that he can provide that production too. So the Raptors' goal this season is to win games, and I think what Darko is doing to is trying to maximize as many wins as possible. I look at it from a standpoint of he's seen these guys for a couple years now, and they haven't done their part on their end. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a summer question and what you want to do in order to maximize this team. And there you're getting a games like this, you're getting a really good understanding of what are the requisite skill sets that they need around Scotty Barnes to win games against really, really good teams.
And with that too, it's clear we talked about the record 1-11 versus top 6 teams, 4-15 versus top 10 teams. This team, whether it's the roster or the coaching, whatever, it is winning the winnable games and
Yep.
it is losing everything else. This team cannot punch up against the truly good teams in the NBA. And whether you think that's coaching or whether you think that is a roster construction problem, it is a problem. It's smacking us in the face repeatedly. The big thing is just like, if it is coaching, which I don't think it is personally, but if it is coaching, does the front office have the gumption to say, yoink, we have to change the coach? That's an easier decision, but I think the wrong one. The tougher decision is having a sober look at the roster and being like, we built this, we picked some of these young men, and none of them, there's just not enough. And to
Yep.
say, like, we got to cut loose and we have to make decisions, to not hang on to the sunk cost fallacy thing. It's, you do at some point have to cut bait. I'm sure the Thunder loved Alexei Pokusevsky. I'm sure they loved him, man.
Yeah.
I'm sure Trey Man was very popular on that team. And
Mhm.
even Trey gave them production to some degree too. They were just like, nah, it's not going to work. Of course, they had guys to replace them. The Raptors, I guess we'll wait and
Yeah.
see. Anything else on team building before we move to the back end of this thing?
I don't think it's also I don't think it starts and ends with the young guys too. And anything that happened in the season, you're taking away that like Scotty Barnes is one of the 30 best NBA players in the league, which you're happy with.
Mm-hmm.
If if the young guys played great and Scotty looks like a top 50 guy, you're like, oh, this we're screwed. The hardest part and the hardest question has been answered, which I'm happy to see.
Yeah.
I think even in the starting lineup, both RJ and IQ, it's hard to picture them being a part of the equation of when they want to punch up. It's games like this where like defensively you're not getting enough. And in terms of creation, Scotty Scotty is able to do that sort of in bursts, but it's clear that he's going to need someone that is going to generate high level offense around him to best utilize his skills and then allow him to be the defensive playmaker that rises the tide of the team and like aids winning. But it's hard to see these guys being the answer right now.
This is such a good point. This gives the Raptors, while it might not be easy, they have the clarity. I think it's pretty easy to put yourself in a position where it's like you could be a really, really great team if Scotty Barnes is your second best player. It
Yeah.
is your job. Listen, they're a good team with Scotty Barnes as his best player. It is your job to make sure that you can get somebody in here who is better than Scotty Barnes so that Scotty Barnes over the next 3 years doesn't become the piece that every team is dreaming about pairing their guy with.
Yep.
And that happened with everybody from the past team, and the Raptors failed to get enough back. OG is incredible in New York. Pascal obviously fit exactly what Indiana wanted to do. You know, it's like even
Yeah.
Fred in Houston was like very important. They didn't get enough back, and it's because they weren't exactly sure how to run that hierarchy or build that team out. They have to figure it out with Scotty, and I don't know what it takes. And listen, if this sounds like Scotty fanboying or something like that, I think he's good enough to
Yeah.
be valued above everyone else, and for him to be part of the vision, at least in part. You have to figure out how you put an all NBA player next to Scotty. And if it can be an all NBA player who fits really well, like a guard, I
Yeah.
mean, the next couple years look radical. And
Yeah.
Cleveland was a team that was headed towards a funk. If imagine what the past couple years would look like if they kept it with Sexton and Markkanen, if it never became Donovan Mitchell.
Yep.
But when they got Donovan Mitchell, they still had Mobley and they still have Allen. And yeah, they moved on from Garland, who's great, but they get to keep trying.
Mhm.
The Raptors really have to make that leap. And I don't know if they're going to wait on development. I don't know if they're going to try and retool. I don't know what it's going to be, but it has to come. It has to come.
Yeah, and I guess that there's obviously carryover from the last front office, and you look at the Fred and Pascal era, it's marked by indecision of not choosing a side of where you want to go, and kind of when they did, it seemed like it was too late because they didn't get as much value as they possibly could, like a team like Memphis did just at the deadline.
They were
I think
even, just quickly, they were undermined because they built a team that could win when they traded for Jakob. They would have
yeah,
won games, but then Fred left. And so the bottom fell out immediately. Like they made a decision and then out of their control, but perhaps not out of their wisdom, Fred left.
yeah,
Yeah, that's tough.
this is brutal. And I think Scotty has pushed the notice enough where you can't go into another season thinking we're going to be in the middle. You have to try to punch up and give him 2 to 3 years of being in the playoffs, trying to beat some of the better teams in the league. Because there's going to be a time where he looks around like the Detroit Pistons figured it out to some degree. They're the best team in basketball right now. Um, Evan Mobley has been through the fire as well. You need him to get those reps and to have playoff series to see what he's made of.
Yeah. I listen, I wouldn't fault him. Scotty is not guaranteed to want to be a Raptor for his whole career.
Yep.
And if the Raptors are just kind of like, why? You and I have never felt the type of way. There's no expectation of ownership or infringing upon mobility, not from this
Mhm.
podcast for players. If Scotty looks up there at the end of the contract and says, nah, not for me, I would not be able to blame him.
Yeah.
But if they do a good job building around him, then you can't blame him. But if things continue with like ho hum, you can blame him. And then he'll probably get to choose a really good team or whatever it works out. But the Raptors, be that team he chooses. Make the compelling argument. It's stressing people out, I'm sure, this talk. But I'll tell you what, basketball can be stressful. I won't say any of the, but there it is, the logo change in the background. Basketball can be stressful, people. But your choice of beer, it doesn't have to be. Coors Light delivers mountain cold refreshment. S and I were at the game yesterday. Somebody told me they love the ad reads. The top comment on the last podcast is, we love these ad reads. People love beer. And
Yeah.
when the mountains turn blue, the beer is as cold and refreshing as the Rockies. We got snow again. Can't believe it. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold certified for a smoother finish. Make sure to celebrate responsibly, people, and you must, of course, be of legal drinking age. Do not drink if you're under the legal drinking age. These are the rules from the podcast and from the current body of legislation. You can find Coors Light near you only if you're of age. Visit CoorsLightShop.ca. Okay, if there's any other Raptors thing, you let me know and we'll talk about it. But I do want to talk about the Evan Turner, the middle class basketball stuff. I think that's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Take it away.
Okay, so Evan Turner suggested, and Evan Turner is cannon fodder for this topic. I just think it's a really interesting
Yeah.
topic. He suggested that what is creating the death of middle class basketball players or poor basketball players is the analytics revolution. The kids who reach the league, that it's becoming an affluent sport, a country
Yeah.
club sport. What do you think about that? Because I know very strongly. I thought about this a lot. I know how I feel, but where are you on it?
I basketball's never been more expensive to get involved in and to get to a level where you're recognized and known and got to another level. But I do think why things have also changed and adjusted is that the NBA has just become a more global league. So there's teams looking for talent all over the world. There's more people playing basketball, and it's gotten to a point where like having specific skills and having the resources and finances to push yourself and get above that edge has become more important than being this great player. I think it's notoriety and having resources. It's that I think that's what's changed like significantly.
I think there's also like there is just a science to this in that the NBA has a physical cutoff in a way that basically no other sport does.
Mhm.
You have to be tall. You have to be
Yep.
this tall to like Jamal Shed exists among like four peers in the NBA. There's like four guys around his size. You have to be this tall to ride. And you have to be this tall and you have to be coordinated and you have to be good. And then you enter into, as you say, there's an economic aspect to this, considering the barrier of entry in terms of skill development is so much higher now. And the fact that this is a 12-month sport for kids, you have to
Mhm.
travel, you have to be doing all this stuff. So there is an economic impetus towards wealth in a
Yep.
way that there never was. There is a physical impetus towards height and athleticism. What does that select for? Former players' kids. And it
Yep.
will continue to select for that in a way that no other sport can select for. The amount of juniors and all that are in the NBA, and I think going forward is going to be radical because the NBA has that height cutoff and it starts to have that economic thing in a way that just there's no way getting around that. And I think I like a lot of the conversations that some of the players have about I like it if it's like a, a 5 month or 7 month thing that kids do, like the well-rounded athlete stuff. I do think it fits into like this efficiency, productivity.
Mhm.
It fits into that. Like the kids are labor by the time
Yeah.
they're like 8 or 9. That's how I feel about that. I will say though, I think that there is another thing that Evan didn't talk about, but I do think is true, is that the coverage of the NBA being analytics driven. And listen, I don't know what percentage of like data scientists or people who indulge in all the spreadsheet stuff are black, but what's clear is that the influx of people who do that type of work and affected, basketball media have been largely white. The people who talk about the league is changing. And the lack of the barrier, the fact that there's no barrier to entry did mean that there is, in some pockets, more black people talking about the NBA. But I really think there's only so many well-paying jobs in this industry
Yep.
that I think that that's where analytics is a little bit like, ideal in its implementation or who it invites in or allows in. And I wonder what that looks like in the future. Does that pass your sniff test?
That makes sense. Like when we go to summer league, a lot of people have like NBA hopes, and they're here to make connection. Not you and I, for some reason. I feel like we're odd
We
people.
don't we don't network. We're bad.
But the general person that like they're trying to get into an MBA organization, they're grad student video analysts who has this either like a mathematical background or a master's degree that is trying to get through and break through into the NBA. That's created a significant barrier in the type of person that takes resources, that takes connections. And when things like that are tied together, when connections are involved, people are more likely and more willing to do things for people that look like them that they know. And that tends to be a white person.
It's I mean nepotism. We're
Yeah.
introducing the term nepotism to everybody. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've heard about this before, but the NBA runs rampant with it. And I do think that I don't know if it was easier for people to choose like back in the day, like a white guy because they liked the cut of his jib and how he coaches, or if it's like easier now to just be like, oh yeah, he's a data analyst and he was an intern with the basketball team at his college, and like that's just an
Yeah.
easy way to go. I don't know, but I am I am always wondering about this kind of stuff. And I also think like anytime you subject yourself to the authoritarianism of numbers, you have to ask
Yeah.
yourself the powers that be, who do they want numbers to support most of the time? And I always wonder about that. But I do wonder where basketball is in like 20 years, because we think about like grassroots basketball and we think about where it's come from. Think about the basketball that you and I played. Not high level, but we played
Yeah.
okay basketball. What
Mhm.
does it look like for a kid to just take up basketball in 20 years?
I think it gets not to the level that soccer is, but I think it becomes so global where there's so many pockets of people playing basketball where being an American and North American player and playing on an AAU circuit, I don't even think that will guarantee you like D1 looks. I think the amount of people playing basketball and overseas that are going to come over and be a fixture. You see it to some degree now, but be a fixture within like college basketball in AAU circuits. I think the playing field in terms of like looks evens itself out from the average overseas player and an American player.
I do. I think it will one. It will necessitate on some level the expansion of leagues, intertwined leagues, levels of
Yeah.
leagues. It necessitates that. But considering that the NBA is so much more controlling in their brand management and like all this kind of stuff, how does a league like that ever allow itself to be dispersed into levels with relegation? How does it
Yeah.
ever take on the model of global soccer where like, there's like transfer fees and all this kind of stuff? I wonder if it has the capacity for that, given the how much of a grip branding has on the NBA. Like from your perspective as a marketer, I'm sure you can understand and like see some of that shaping up.
Yeah. I I think the what would be interesting, the NBA has like there's enough basketball players and notoriety from kids like literally from 10 years old up where I truly prefer the Euros academy system where you don't pretend yourself that these are students that they're trying to have this academic career. Not that they're not, but you they get paid. They're trained to try to make the NBA, and they're being brought up from literally age 8 all the way until till 18. I think a huge problem with I think AAU and how it's marketed, or even college basketball, how it's marketed, is that there's this youthful essence of innocence that
Hmm.
we're trying to help these children um, develop skills when it's all generated off of like the guise of making money off children's backs. Whereas like an academy system, it's very straightforward. Everyone knows what they're signing up for, and kids can make a lot of money very very fast if that's the path that they choose.
Also, teams get to you get invested in like
Yeah,
there's a top down incentive structure, and also, I mean, it works better in some places in Europe because there's more robust social safety nets and just education is more robust. So even though they are
yeah,
treated and like, hey, you're gonna do this, you're on a wage or whatever, there is, I don't know, people come out quite educated anyway. And there's an expectation that if you don't do this, you may get to work in the field, just in a different application or whatever it is. I don't know. There's so much about the growth of basketball that I'm really interested in. Anything else on the Raptors before I read a little Cleveland Detroit spread or money line? One of the two. Any other thoughts?
I think just from the game, you could still take away how they played from the first 3 quarters. The Darko quote, don't love it. It- What he's what he said was true. They played very, very well. The team is the team they played is very, very good, but they should have won. And there's a kind of essence around this team or ethos around the team is that we're trying to win, but we're okay if we lose. And if that's the case, in the summer, you need to make a hard decision, and they need to make some sort of move to get to a place where they can feel comfortable every night, wanting to win against the best teams in the league. I think it's very clear through this run and the quotes that they make in a lot of games that they're okay with losing games.
Is this Darko DeRozan? Is this what you're hearing? If we
Oh
had
man,
LeBron, we'd win too. But
Demar
he was
broke my
right.
heart when he
He
was right.
was
He was
right.
it's the greatest player ever played.
He was the amount of right that he was incredible amount of right because it was so proven. It was like even just if you investigate it
Yeah.
as like more than a quote is like kind of like a rule. LeBron made 8 straight finals. So if you're an Eastern Conference team and he did it on different teams with different constructions, if you're DeMar DeRozan and you've been in the East the whole time, you see you lose to him, you see every other team lose him, you're like, yeah, if you're on his team, you make it. If you're not, you don't. And it's true what he said. Um, What else is true is that this segment is a presentation of TunyBet Online Sportsbook and Casino. Thousands of slot games, live casino at your fingertips, and a sportsbook made for Ontario. Get your game on with TunyBet. TunyBet is licensed and regulated by the AGCO and iGaming Ontario 19 plus. Ontario only. Please play responsibly. I beg of you, please play responsibly. Do not put yourself out. I beg of you. I beg of you. The Cleveland Cavaliers are plus 7.5. The Detroit Pistons are minus 7.5. That is on TunyBet, and I will say that the Detroit Pistons, they win a lot. This is the information they give you. They win a lot against the other top teams in the NBA, not the Spurs the other night, though. So if I were a guessing man, I would have no idea. Tough to guess on this one. Trey, anything else before we get out of here?
I'm still blessed not to be thinking about college basketball. I watched my first.
Caitlin just wrote the Darren Peterson piece.
Oof. I'd be excited if I was there. Yeah, that's fair. Last year we had no chance at Cooper Flag or Early, so it was just like, hey,
we thought we did a little bit. We wondered. Yeah, we hoped. We dreamed.
Oh, yeah. But I watched my first college basketball game last week, and I'm like, I don't know who's on the court right now. I felt good, so I'm still happy how the season's going. The next stretch is going to be very, very tough. Like the Raptors schedule isn't the greatest, but again, it's just more reasoning and more data points to show what this team needs to do to get to the next level next season.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And honestly, we're on the road to a playoff series.
Yeah.
And the playoffs is a funky environment. If ever a team were going to do something crazy, that's the place for it to happen. And as you mentioned, like last year, at this time last year, and for the past couple years, I've been sending you big data dumps on and being like, okay, please watch this prospect. These are some of the interesting numbers. Whereas we just don't have to do that now. We just watch the team we cover. We're not adding another league into it. It's a blessing.
So good.
Yep. I'm not into the Bartovic queries, man. You and I, if we're covering the college, we're gonna watch and we're gonna think about what that means. But you can listen. If there's anybody out here who wants to get into it, at least in the public sphere, you can probably, Trey and I are not doing the most expedient version of this. We're doing old school Moneyball. His dick's in the room 2 minutes before he gets there or whatever. Would you like to close out the podcast?
Yeah. I'm still working. Like
you said, keep on rocking last time. It's not so bad.
Well, that's true. After you're doing all those reaction pods, when did you feel like, I've got a way to close this out? How many reaction pods?
Dude, I hope nobody ever listens to it, but if you listen the first time I ever did reaction pod, I sound nervous. I just like I know you talk a lot now for your job and for this, but try and imagine just sitting by yourself, because that's how there's no chat back then. Sitting by yourself and just talking for like 20 minutes.
Ooh.
That is a muscle that is not easily worked. And I just jumped right into it. And I was like, whoa. But I don't know. I don't know when. Have a blessed day and goodbye. I was signing off my articles with have a blessed day. I always have. I also had a phase where I would use a bunch of pirate jargon in the quick reactions. Because I just thought it was such a funny inside joke. But here's the most disappointing part. Basically, nobody ever acknowledged it. I was using pirate jargon for like 5 months, and nobody said anything about it. I was like, dudes, I'm talking like a pirate here. No, only a little bit, but I was like, oh, these lusty laggard louts. And nobody, not a single soul. There's like thousands of people reading it. Nobody thought it was funny to see the term laggard louts. Anyway, go ahead. You close it out.
Oh. It is a blessed day to be a Raptors fan. We continue to keep going. We'll see you guys next week, and stay safe.